There's been another twist in the Grampians rock climbing saga. An article in the Herald Sun this morning declared that the official documents show widespread destruction of significant cultural sites and a, quote, systematic failure of policy. It also mentions a report to be released by another experts that, among other things, will make suggestions about vandalism by rock climbers. Mike Tomkins is the president of the Australian Rock Climbing Association of Victoria. Good morning.
Good morning, Rebecca.
Good to have you with us this morning. I'm yet to see these papers. I'm only going by the paper's story this morning, but I understand you're quite aware of these findings. So just explain to us a little bit of the background to that.
Yes, we're very aware of what's happening here. There's been a systemic failure of Parks Victoria and previous agencies to protect rock art in the Grampians. And the articles in today's paper do describe this very well, that there's no protection happening at all and that the rock art is in great danger. And unfortunately, the rock climbers have been made a scapegoat for any damage that's occurring, when in fact, there's a lot of graffiti happening, which is really day visitors to the park and people who only probably visit the Grampians once in their life. The rock art is low down, obviously at person level, and you can't say who has done that damage. Rock climbers certainly would not do such a thing because climbers are great conservationists.
So are you saying, or you're reinforcing the fact that Parks Vic that have not done enough to make sure that those sites are protected?
That's correct. Well, what's happened is that Parks Victoria has banned rock climbing and put up about 5 signs, and that's all they've done really. And they said it's the rock climbers that are the problem. But really, we've got a much bigger problem of access to the park by everybody, and a lot of work is required by Parks Victoria.
It says, sorry, go on. Yep, go on.
And we'd like to offer our help to do that, and Parks Victoria is not really putting any effort into doing that. They're just seeking to ban rock climbers and call it a job done.
The Herald Sun says in their article that they can reveal a new report into rock art and climbing in the Grampians will detail how Parks Victoria failed to communicate for decades to climbers about cultural heritage issues in the park. So in that regards, are you saying that really if rock climbers had been aware of those particular areas that were vulnerable, then things could have been very different?
Well, I think, in fact, rock climbers know a lot more about this than Parks Victoria does. The Register of Cultural Heritage is secret, but the visible art is certainly known about by rock climbers because they have a rather detailed knowledge of the area. But what I'd really like to move into is we really need to speak to the traditional owners. And Parks Victoria are not communicating very well in this space, and the traditional owners don't want to speak to the rock climbers because we've been smeared by Parks Victoria in this campaign. And we'd like to be part of the solution. I'd like to make a public appeal to the traditional owners to talk to the Australian Climbing Association. We'd like to offer our knowledge of the Grampians and combine that with the deep knowledge that the traditional owners have and start to work on reconciliation over this, because there's a lot of opportunities here for good things to happen that are being blocked at the moment by a government agency. I really would like to speak to the leaders of Gunjut Maring and Barangi Gadjin and Eastern Ma, and do some cooperative work here. We can help with all of these issues if only we were allowed to.
So what would you say to them?
We'd like to sit down and listen to their concerns.
Have you put out that olive branch, I guess you could say?
We have, but such is the smear campaign that's been held against climbers. Our reputation is of the people who've done all the damage, whereas in fact there's a lot of damage happening day by day by people who will only visit the park once, and that's where the vulnerable artifacts and artworks are. The climbers know where the visible art is. What we don't know is where the intangible things are. Really like to know so that we can help.
Because some heritage sites aren't necessarily about the rock art or anything of that nature.
There's a lot of subtleties to this, and we're aware that the subtleties exist, but we don't know where they are, obviously. And there's no communication happening with the climbing community. There's no communication happening with Parks Victoria. And that's a crying shame, really, because day by day, more and more tourists are being encouraged to go to these places. and they're ignorantly scrawling all over the rock.
Like when you say scrawling, what do you mean by that?
There's paint, there's spray paint, there's scratching, there's charcoal drawing, all at ground level, all over vulnerable sites, nothing to do with climbers. And we would like to be on the ground helping out to solve this problem rather than shut out the Grampians and vilified in this way.
So you're saying people are going in there and actually causing graffiti on some of the rock sites?
On the very popular trails, it's happening all along them. We've got, we've had a look at this and we're absolutely shocked. We've got photographic evidence, and this is being blamed on rock climbers, and very often it's not even in rock climbing locations at all. It's tourist trails.
So where is Parks Vic left you at the moment? Because we do know there's been bans, and implemented in at least 8 sites at this point that have been readily accessed by rock climbers for decades. My understanding is that those sites shouldn't have been able to be accessed, or they should have been implemented. Those sites should have been accessed for a number of years, but they were allowed to be accessed, and now they can't be. So what's the long-term plan that do you understand from Parks Victoria in regards to some of these sites?
I believe that Parks Victoria are carrying out surveys of both cultural heritage and environmental issues all over the Grampians. The 8 sites in question have been banned and they've been signposted, and all these bans have been respected. What is not being respected by climbers is widespread bans of hundreds of cliffs across the Grampians, called the special protection areas. And climbers have lost patience, and they're starting to go and climb in these areas again because there's no work being done by Parks Victoria to protect them. And the climbers are actually, absolutely lost patience with the land manager in this case, because after 8 months there's been very little information, only smear campaign. We'd like to deal directly with the traditional owners at this point, if that's possible. And we'd like to, as I said, we'd like to listen to them. We'd like to demonstrate our conservation values and our care and our wholehearted concern for their needs. By climbers being in the park, they will protect these areas. The climbers are actually guardians and stewards of the park. That's how we have been for decades.
This report that the Herald Sun's reporting about, it's let me just read this part. It says, a report prepared by cultural heritage expert Ben Gunn, Jake Goods of Parks Victoria and others is critical of rock climbers in parts of the park, particularly with the use of bolts and chalk. It accuses some climbers of vandalism. So that's what's coming out in this report. So what's your response to that?
Climbers are not responsible for vandalism. The vandalism is not in that realm at all. Some of the aspects of climbing have been vilified in this way. In fact, climbing is a respected activity all over the world, and there are management techniques for all of the impacts for climbing. Some safety bolts are required to protect life. Some chalk is used to dry the hands of the climbers. These are impact issues that can be easily managed. The rock art and the cultural sites are at low level. The climbing happens at high level by definition. The risk is at low level, and the climbers are well away from that zone. There are impacts. We acknowledge there are impacts. Everything has an impact, but we do need to manage these rather than wholesale ban what is a world-renowned climbing area, because to ban the climbers, you would have to ban everybody. The danger is from the general public. It's from day tourists and visitors.
Did the authors of this report approach the Australian Climbing Association of Victoria or yourself?
No.
So you haven't spoken to anyone who's researched this issue?
No, and in fact, if this report is issued and it's blaming climbers for the graffiti and vandalism, that will be it's not academically correct. There's absolutely no evidence that climbers have caused the graffiti and vandalism. And if that comes out in that report, we will be certainly taking that to certain levels of academic rigor to see if that can be proven. Because if it's a scientific report, it needs to have evidence.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with us this morning. Mike Tomkins is the president of the Australian Rock Climbing of Victoria. That report, we're yet to see the full details of that report. We're going by an article that has been printed by the Herald Sun newspaper this morning about that report, and I'm sure more will be revealed in time once the report is officially released. We have approached Parks Victoria for comment at this point. It's 15 minutes away from 9.